All right, this is Wally Garib, and welcome to Learn the Bible, post 115. This is Exodus 25 to 27, the basic setup of the tabernacle. And this is our series on the tabernacle, part 4. So we've mentioned previously how the basic setup of the tabernacle and all of its furnishings make up the symbol of a cross. We have also described the surrounding structures, including that white linen fence and the gate on the east side of that fence. So we're going to quickly review the different furnishings that are used to make up the tabernacle, and we're going to talk a little more of exactly how the tabernacle itself is subdivided. So whenever we think of the outer court, this is a perfect rectangle. And by perfect rectangle, I mean that it's exactly twice as long as it is wide. So that means it's made up of two squares. And then once you get into that outer court, in the back square, there's going to be a tabernacle. The tabernacle is this tent-like structure, and it is going to be split into two pieces. 2/3 of it's going to be called the holy place. And then there's going to be this curtain that separates another 1/3 of it, which is called the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. So we'll be talking about each of these in detail later, but today we're just going to do a basic overview. So just remember that the Levites could go into the outer court, but they could not go into the tabernacle. Only the priests could go into the tabernacle, into the holy place. And only the high priest could go into the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. So when you think about entering into that linen fence, you have to pass through a gate. That gate, which we discussed in the last post, is facing the tribe of Judah. It comes from the east, and that's where the tribe of Judah stood, because we know that Jesus Christ is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And we know that the line of kings for Israel always had to come from Judah, and that's from Genesis 49. So the first thing after you go into that gate, you enter this first square of the two squares made up of this outer court, and in the center of that first square is a large brazen or brass altar. It's about 5 cubits by 5 cubits and would be in the dead center of that first half of the court. And we're going to discuss each of these furnishings later, but just keep in mind that in the center of the first half of this outer court is this brazen altar, and that's in the middle of the first square of this rectangle. After you pass that brazen altar, which was always burning with a sacrifice, you would come to this brass laver, this brass wash basin, and it's made for the washing of the priests, and it would be set in front of the tabernacle. So remember, if we have two squares hooked together to make this long rectangle, as you get to the back of the first square, you're going to find this brass wash basin. And then right when the second square starts, you're going to see the opening of the tabernacle, the actual front part of the tabernacle. And we don't know how big the laver is, and this too is going to be significant, and we're going to talk about that in future posts. But once you reach the halfway point of this outer court, you come to that tent called the tabernacle. And this tabernacle was split into two sections. The first 2/3 of it was called the holy place, and that was what they called in cubits, 20 cubits by 10 cubits. And then when you get to the back of that, there was a curtain separating the last 10 cubits of this tent-like structure, and behind there was something called the most holy place, and that's the Holy of Holies. So that means that overall, this tent inside of this outer court is 10 cubits by 30 cubits. And because of how meticulous the Jewish laws were, it was always 20 cubits from the outer court on all sides. So that means that if you look at the picture below, you'll see that essentially the outer court is this nice rectangle, and then the tabernacle is set at the very middle of that rectangle and facing it so that all around it there would be 20 cubits between it and the outer linen fence. There'd be an equidistance all the way around it. So that would mean that the most holy place, again, if you just draw a diagram, or if you look at the pictures below, the most holy place would be dead center in this second square. And a picture is really worth 1,000 words, because if you look below, you'll kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. So without getting into too much detail in this post, which is just a general overview, I'll say that the outer court is that rectangle made of two squares, and each half is going to represent a coming of Christ. We know that Jesus Christ came once about 2,000 years ago. We know that he suffered, he died on a cross, and then he was resurrected and went to heaven. But he promises to come again. So we have these two squares. The first square has at the very center of it this brazen altar, a brass altar. We've already talked about the symbolism of brass being that it's symbolic of judgment. And we know that an altar is representative of sacrifice because that's where they would sacrifice the animals, and it would be a sacrifice for sin. So that means in Christ's first coming, he should be accepted and he should be expected to come and be judged for sin. He's going to be sacrificed for our sin. And then when you go to his second coming, you're going to find in the dead center of that the Holy of Holies. And there you're going to find something called the Ark of the Covenant and something called the mercy seat. And that was made of solid gold. The ark was made of wood and gold. The mercy seat was made of solid gold and was a throne. And that tells us that when he comes for his second coming, which is what we're all eagerly awaiting, he is going to come as the glorified man, the divine man, the God man, and he's going to come and rule, and he's going to be king. And he is the one who contained the Ten Commandments, just as the Ark of the Covenant, we'll later see, contained the Ten Commandments. That means that his first coming showed his suffering. His second coming is going to show his perfection. And his mercy seat represents his godhood and his kingship. So anyways, check those pictures out below, and then starting with the next post, we'll start talking each of those pieces of furniture and discussing the significance of each one. God bless you. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions, please comment below.